So welcome everybody. We've just had a brief round of introductions, and now we're going to be going into looking at SDE for PDA. This session will just touch the very, very tip of the iceberg, because this session is intended to help you decide if you want to actually explore further. Some people are just curious, they don't know if this applies to them, or they don't know if, they already know everything they need to know. So I'm going to just briefly take you through. There's only so much we can do in sort of an hour or less. So we're going to start by very briefly going over a couple of definitions just to get us started. And I'm going to do that by pasting them up on the whiteboard. Firstly, we've got pathological demand avoidance. PDA is a profile whose main characteristic is to avoid everyday demands and expectations to an extreme extent. That's from autism.org.uk. Then characteristics ascribed to this condition include greater refusal to do what is asked of the person, even for activities the person would normally like. The underlying cause for this avoidance is said to be a high level of anxiety, usually from expectations or demands being placed on children, which can lead to a feeling of not being in control of a situation. Children with PDA feel threatened when they are not in control of their environment and their actions, which triggers the fight, flight, or freeze response, which I think could use some work from Wikipedia, but it again gives us a bit of a starting idea. I'm going to now go on to just posting up a couple of definitions that I like to use in contrast with those, because it helps me to think about things differently. First, a more official one. PDA is a type of autistic neurodivergence that includes an anxiety-driven reaction to feeling out of control and to perceived demands, which can make even ordinary everyday demands feel life-threatening and trigger fight, flight, freeze, fawn, flop responses. I also like to rename it perceived demand anxiety. When something is perceived by the PDA as a demand, even if other people don't intend it as a demand or can't see how it could be perceived that way, anxiety flares up. And a key thing to understand is that the higher the background level of anxiety, the more likely something will be perceived as a demand. For example, now let's have a quick look at our poll results. So, in the polling and share the results. So, I first asked which of these word choices would stop you from scrolling down to join my meeting. And one person was already stopped by Zoom link below, you will only see it if you scroll down. Now, for most minds, there's hardly any difference at all between people can see it by scrolling down. It's easy to see if you scroll down. You will only see it if you scroll down. But for a PDA mind, there's quite a big difference there. People can see it by scrolling down is just information. It is easy to see if you scroll down is already an assumption that I'm placing on you that you will find it easy, which already feels threatening. You will only see it if you scroll down, already loads the consequence of whether you scroll down or not. So the demands are rising. Please scroll down looks very nice to most of us. It's lovely, except that if we know that please is a social expectation, that means now you have to do it because I said please, that one gets even harder. Then just plain scroll down looks neutral, unless we've got an anxiety going on, and then scroll down is a command, especially if it's capitalized, especially if there's an exclamation mark. And then we reach what I feel is the default space for most mainstream coercive education. Scroll down, or you won't be able to see the link, and then you will miss out on this opportunity. And that's the situation that PDA kids face when they enter any educational environment. There's the subtext that's very, very clear. You have to do this, or else you're going to be compromised in some way. Now, most of the people who did the poll here wouldn't find any of those a problem. However, when we go down to the next level, which gets much more demanding, most people would be stopped, but not everybody. So this is not to show you how to word things in text. It's to give you a bit of an idea here. These demands keep escalating. So if your PDA is already in a state of background anxiety, this is some of the subtext that might come in. Almost as if, let's imagine that in the Zoom call, we've got a hacker who can hack in to me here and clone my voice and change the words and send them out to you. And when I'm trying to say, please scroll down, because then you'll be able to see the link, and then you'll be able to click it, and then you'll be able to join the session, and that will be really great, because then you won't miss out on this opportunity. Imagine if somebody edited in, scroll down now, I told you to scroll down, do it, I say you must, and you have to obey me. You don't scroll down, I will punish you, I'm in charge of your life, and you have to do everything I say, do it right now or else. That can be literally what it is like for a child with PDA when people don't realize that that child is in a state of anxiety, and on top of that, the way that something is being handled is actually triggering an interpretation and an experience that is really on the scale of that last one. Then let's briefly look at the consequences here. If I screamed that at you, the responses that people gave here, one would quietly ignore me. One would have to work hard not to hit me. One would try to get away from me. One would calmly and kindly point out that the way I'm speaking does not work for them. And one said other, which I don't know, do you want to share that? If you're welcome to, if you'd like to, the other thing that you would do, if you would like to, otherwise it's okay. Okay. So back to...
Well, the one thing
yes.
I would do is take some time and think about what I'm going to do.
Okay. All right. So basically, when we're looking at PDA, we're looking at a certain level of anxiety that kicks in fight, flight, or freeze. Now that's true for all of us, that at a certain level of anxiety, we kick into fight, flight, or freeze. So for example, Harry Thompson, fantastic PDA, very charismatic. He likes to use the example of, imagine if you as a parent were in a public place and somebody tried to steal your baby. You know, how polite would you be? Would you lash out? Would you think it was justified? So when you're in that fight, flight, freeze level of response, we're no longer thinking clearly, we're no longer necessarily being rational, we're no longer necessarily being able to be considerate of other people. We're simply in a state of panic that makes us do stuff until we can calm down. And that's where I say, you know, PDA for me is a lot like a peanut allergy, in that most people can eat a peanut butter sandwich absolutely fine. Some people might get a tummy ache. Some people might throw up, and other people might have an anaphylactic reaction. So PDA really goes into a fight, flight, freeze response around certain issues that many other people don't think are significant, which leads us to accuse a PDA of overreacting. However, there's, you know, reaction, overreaction depends on your system and how it's constructed. So just like you can't say to somebody with a peanut allergy, you know, you're overreacting to the peanut butter. You know, this is something that you don't have a choice about. And I think that this is probably the most important point for really grasping and accepting. And this is why this is a main feature of our second session, because in my experience, I see relationships transforming at the point that the people dealing with the PDA truly grok that this isn't optional. They stop talking about, oh, this person is getting away with things, this person is running my life, this person is, you know, needs to be put in, when they can really truly grok that this is not a choice. This is something that is happening. then we can move into, okay, how do we actually deal with it appropriately? So now, again, just like, you know, my daughter was briefly at a regio environment where there was a child with a severe food allergy. And the answer in that space was to just cut that food out of all of the lunch boxes. And that, you know, made a safe environment for anybody who had that allergy that hadn't been identified. And, you know, it's sort of the same for PDA. If you can create an environment that's safe for the PDA, you can create an optimal SDE environment, because an optimal SDE environment is a non-coercive environment that is sensitive to unique individual needs. And if you can be sensitive to the unique individual needs of a PDA in a way that leaves them really feeling safe to be able to be themselves and pursue their education in that space, then you've created a really great non-coercive environment where your other kids are going to feel safe to do the same. So I like to look at the idea of the canary in the coal mine. Coal miners in the UK used to take a canary down with them, because if there was a little whiff of gas, the canary would faint. And then the miners would know, okay, we better get out before we pass out and get asphyxiated or exploded or whatever. And that canary was really precious because it saved lives. And this is also where, as we, you know, some people in the introductions were talking about, you know, we're living in a time where, you know, PDA is on the increase because of the way society is being run. I think also PDAs really give us a golden path for human transformation of culture at this time. You know, they really got that beautiful sensitivity that when it's in the wrong environment causes such great suffering. But if we can adapt that environment to suit the PDAs, we really have a chance to go from what I call vertical culture to horizontal culture. Some of you have worked with me on horizontal communication. And just very, very briefly, the basic is that we're currently in a vertical culture, which is a culture of hierarchy and command. You know, the king tells the general, who tells the captain, who tells the soldier, who, you know, or the patriarch tells the mother, who tells the kids, who kick the dog. You know, there's this chain of hierarchy and control and power where everybody's always trying to survive and there's not much intimacy. Whereas horizontal culture is when we are equals, we're connecting heart to heart, we're able to hear each other, we have a multi-partial idea in terms of everybody's point of view is valid, and we need to find the best win-win way forward instead of, you know, who's right, who's wrong, who gets to win, who gets to lose. And I think for humanity to survive, that's the transition we need to make. And I think PDAs are doing an incredible service, and I don't want them to suffer for it, because I'm seeing them suffer for it. And I think the quicker we can get the message, the sooner the PDAs can just, you know, give us this amazing service and be rewarded for it and appreciated for it instead of suffering for it and being blamed. So that's my mission. So having said that, let's move on. If you are wondering, some of the quickest ways to identify whether it's PDA specifically, again, Sylvie, this will be a little shallow, but I got the impression that this is also the quickest way for people to see if they can identify what's going on. Let me just blank this first clear. Would be a couple of these things. So let's put it symptoms like that, because some of the things that you'll often see parents talking about when they haven't yet realized that it's PDA, or they're starting to think that it might be, it's like, oh, my daughter won't shower, she won't brush her teeth, won't do her homework, won't even go out of the house. Things that seem very simple to most people. The key here is that for most kids, the more they understand that it's expected of them and that it's important to do, the easier it becomes to do it. Whereas for a PDA, it can be the opposite process. The more they grasp that it's expected of them every day, and it's important, the harder it can become to do. Very different behaviors over time and space or with particular people. If you're familiar with the story of Jekyll and Hyde, sort of very, very different personality swing in terms of, you know, sort of being very wonderfully generous and considerate and reasonable, off to kind of a very, very different experience. Sometimes, not always, sometimes even kind of violent, aggressive, etc. Piled up demands lead to meltdowns either now or later. So again, just looking back at those poll results, the PDA on a great day, feeling wonderful, might cope perfectly well with please scroll down right now. But if a lot of things have already happened that day, if there's already other factors causing stress, they might not even cope with please scroll down. Also, things a lot of people notice in the early days is that rewards and punishments can backfire, that it can be in quite an unexpected way. It's like, wow, that offer of a reward seemed to make things much harder instead of much easier. Which again is one reason why this is so good for SDE, because as we know, in SDE, self-directed education, extrinsic reward can be a killer of motivation. And if we're tuned into PDA, we can actually see that happening instead of it being an abstract theory. There's often an intense comfort with fantasy and role play. It's partly a way to escape and enjoy. It's also partly a way to enable oneself. It can be easier to clean one's room as Cinderella, because then the demand is sidelined. Legs don't work is just a heck of a common thing. Again, not always, but it's like, I can't go there, my legs don't work. Denial of behavior or lack of a clear memory, you know, in the face of, you know what happened, but they say it wasn't so. It's often something people notice. Don't shout at me. It's also often a common puzzlement when people are at the beginning of figuring out what's going on. It's like, I wasn't shouting. I wasn't shouting. Okay, that's shouting. Again, if a PDA is already in a state of anxiety, the hypersensitivity to demands edits and amplifies that perception. Critical thing down here at the bottom, people often struggle to identify that it's PDA because what happens might not look like anxiety, but it is. So often we'll see things like a PDA is perceived as being not at all anxious, not at all frightened, just violent and aggressive and rude and inconsiderate. But the moment that there's enough safety built up, you actually start seeing that vulnerability, and the PDA is actually able to get to the point where they can say, yeah, that freaks me out. I'm frightened. I can't handle this. I need to step back from that. But there has to be enough safety for that to happen. Again, if we just think of ourselves, you know, as part of the animal kingdom, you know, what do we do and what do other animals do when we are cornered? We don't cower if we're frightened enough. Well, we might. And this is also where the fight, flight, freeze comes in. So very briefly, again, we'll go over this more in session 1 when we go deeper into what PDA is and how it works, but very, very briefly. Fight, flight, freeze. You can go into fight, which is to bite back and snarl and try and push that person away out of your corner so that you can get free and get away and get out of their control. You could flee, so you could cower or try and slip away or run, or you know, my legs don't work, try and go sideways. Freeze would also be a subjective experience of my legs don't work, or you know, some PDA kids might go into a very violent, aggressive meltdown. Others might go into a kind of an implosion where you're just going to see, just not coping, just quietly, just collapsing. And then a critical one that we'll go into more in the first session on Sunday is also fawn, which is something that most people aren't aware of in the fight, flight, freeze constellation. But fawning is when I am anxious to survive. So yes, I'll do whatever you say, boss. Yes, of course, I'm a good little complier. You know, I'll be what I need to be because please don't kill me. And this can look like coping, especially in a mainstream coercive environment. And I had a big aha in a dream about a week ago, that actually what coercive mainstream education is set up to do, ideally, is put every child into a fight, flight, freeze, fawn state. That the ideal of our coercive society is to put every human into a fawn state. Because then you're controllable, you're directable, you're a puppet, you'll do what you're told, you won't cause trouble, and you'll please the people who want to be pleased. And this can make it very difficult to spot PDA in an environment that doesn't feel safe to a PDAer, because sometimes some of them will be triggered into that version, which is also where parents often are disbelieved about what is actually going on, because it looks like their child is coping beautifully in a very inauthentic way. And that's also where self-directed education comes in that self-directed education only works when somebody is safe enough to start relaxing into their authentic self, allow their real self-direction to emerge and engage and drive their learning. So to the extent that kids are not feeling safe in our spaces are not going to work. Right. Let me see what else we need to address before we go to here. Okay, so there's a question here in terms of, would you find it valuable at all to take a 5-minute break out in order to discuss with a partner whether you think it's whether it's PDA that you think you're seeing? So for example, parents who are wondering if it is PDA that they are dealing with, is there value in us taking a couple of minutes for you to privately discuss that with somebody and then we can whiteboard it and discuss it? Or does that feel like it would just be a detour? Can we maybe have a reaction of some kind if you say, yes, I'd like to do that? We could vote on that. Anybody want to go into a breakout to come up with specific things? Okay, you're short on time, so you'd vote for not doing it. Anybody would find it valuable? Okay, also feel free to just drop into the chat or, okay, or whiteboard it. Does anybody have a particular question about a particular situation or behavior that you want to raise at this point, so you know whether you're likely dealing with this, that you want to reality check something? If so, now's your chance to do it. Okay, going. See what that was in the chat that's just come up there. Okay, no. Okay, great. So then, next, we would go over basically the course outline, and together with that, put it together with what it is that you want to achieve during the course. So I'm going to briefly go over the course outline now. And while I'm doing that, you could have a look at what I've put there and think about what it is that you're wanting to get. And then you could also ask either, would it be possible to include, or will this cover? So that you can also really assess whether this is going to be useful to you or not. So let me just get the basic outline. Then in week 2, we'll be looking for that acceptance that I mentioned earlier. That acceptance about, okay, it really does work like that. They can't help it, but they can gradually learn self-mastery just like anyone else. But just like anyone else, let's grasp this. Just like it is really hard for me to learn to control my temper or stop swearing or stop smoking or whatever it is, self-mastery takes skill. We can't be demanding it of kids or even adults, but it is possible for PDA to learn a lot of self-mastery. But the point is, we can't be thinking that therefore that means they could be doing otherwise right now. It's also accepting impact, deeply understanding this action does impact like this, or I am having the impact that I'm having when I do this, that is not optional. I like to say it's like a weather condition. It's like what we want to get in this week is moving to treating PDA like a weather condition. When I go outside and I didn't want it to rain and it starts raining, it does not help me to start trying to negotiate with the sky, trying to punish the sky, trying to change what the sky is doing. In the same way, when a PDA, for example, is having a meltdown, it's too late. It's not going to help me to negotiate or try to prevent it. I then need to be actually acting in acceptance of the fact that it is raining or there is a meltdown happening. And from that place of acceptance, what can I do? So instead of fighting that PDA reality and trying to make it that this shouldn't be happening, we shift to actually being able to embrace what is and engage with it differently. I call it loving what is, after Byron Katie's beautiful phrase, loving what is. Once we really embrace what is happening, then we are empowered to actually help bring a new outcome. And we'll also look briefly at the Cartman drama triangle, which is a horrible, horrible cultural habit and myth of our vertical society, that anytime anything goes wrong, somebody must be blamed and somebody must be punished. And this is a disaster spiral for PDA. Because it kicks off an equal and opposite and greater reaction in the same vein. So learning to shift to multi-partiality, which is appreciating everybody's point of view and accepting the validity of everyone's point of view, and then looking for how can we best create a win-win situation, is crucial for dealing with PDA. Any questions about week 2 before we go on to looking at what 3 will cover? Okay. Then on week 3, we'll be looking for competence. Again, as we implied in week 2, attitude is number 1. So firstly, how are we going to remember and anchor that shift in attitude? Because that's the most critical thing. And then if we've shifted the attitude, what can we do strategically to prevent problems and to deal with problems when they've arrived? So what helps? How to create a positive PDA educational habitat and habits. So how do we shift circumstances so that we actually have a better setup? That word habitat, again, a nice inspiration from Harry Thompson. He likes to, for example, show a picture of a penguin in a jungle. That if you're going to put people in a habitat that's problematic in the first place, then you're going to have problems. So how do we actually set it up so this is a good space for everybody? Then in week 4, we'll be looking at integration, just trying to pull together the things we've covered and learned, how to move closer to these things being automatic, towards feeling empowered, and towards enjoyment. People sometimes think I'm stretching it to say we can enjoy PDA. Bringing joy into something is enjoyment, and absolutely we can bring joy into our experience of PDA. I love PDAs. They're awesome. Also a bit of troubleshooting if people have been practicing things, and how to expand and encourage ourselves. What will our strategy be to help us maintain and expand the new approach? So questions about that course outline. So you're already using consent-based practices. Yes, critically important, but looking to optimize the environments you impact and for ways to advocate and explain it better to places that are not consent-based. Yeah. And I find also you know, what I'm trying to work on at the moment for myself is also explaining it to other people who are engaged with the space. Why are you doing this consent-based stuff? Why are you not doing the vertical thing? You know, how is that actually equitable? Why is it important? What do you do? What do you say to a neurotypical child who says, that's not fair, why is he getting away with that? What do you do to the parent of the neurotypical child who says, why wasn't that kid punished? How do we actually engage with this effectively so that we can optimize our spaces? Other questions? What are the terms to attend? Right. So let me quickly put that up too. Oh, where is it gone? I have to copy it because Bianca put this together. All right. So here is the official course price. Now, some people think I am crazy for saying this up front, but I'm also going to say this up front. This is my logic here about the pricing. Oh, I just have to find my way back here. But those of you who worked with me before know already that this is how I think. So courses are my only income because I volunteer at everything else that I do. So basically, if I don't get paid, I can't afford the time to run courses. So I do need people to pay me. And so it's best for me if you pay me the full rate because it helps. But often people can't manage to do that. And it's better for me if you pay a discounted rate rather than stay away because you can't afford the full rate. Then that's a win-win for both of us. And it's better for the world if you come for free than if you stay away because even a discounted rate isn't workable for you. And the bottom line for me is that is still payment for me on a soul level because I like to see these changes happen. But please don't not pay me if you can pay me because I also do need to survive. So if you can just let me know privately, you can use Patreon, you can use PayPal, you can use direct deposit. You can, if you sign it up to Patreon, it's a monthly pledge that you make until you cancel it, and you can cancel it on a day's notice. So you can also, you know, if you need to divide this payment over a number of months, then you could use the Patreon, for example. Any further questions? So briefly, it will be, yes, Bruno, go for it.
Yeah, sorry, maybe this is a particular question, but just wanted to ask. I'm not going to be able to see the two first sessions. Mm-hmm. Are they going to be available to be seen quickly after they happen so I could catch up for the third one? Or yes, should I just watch everything afterwards?
I would encourage you to, I will send out these to the participants straight away, because for the participants, I don't have to edit at all. So yeah, I will send out the recordings to the people who could have been on the call, but you obviously mustn't share them. Like this recording can go out with this introduction on just to the people who are in this call. You already saw each other, you already met each other. So if you're on the course as a registered participant, you can get the recording basically on the same day that we do it. And I would encourage that, because then you can interact in the third session. You can ask questions that have come up for you. But then before people who are outside of the course at this point see the recording, then obviously I have to edit it. So then it will only be released to other people after the course is over. Because there's only so many times I want to be repeating myself before we go on to another level. I prefer to go on to another level. So then I'm probably more likely to, instead of repeating this beginner course, make the recording available for purchase, so that people can use it to catch up before they join for the next one, where we can go deeper. Okay, any other questions? meaning electronic peer-to-peer cash. I prefer Bitcoin Cash. So if everybody pays me in Bitcoin, that would be awkward. If one person pays me in Bitcoin, that would be very interesting. My son made a 75% profit on a Bitcoin experiment that we did 2 years ago. Unfortunately, we only had 50 Rand to put in the first place, which is about $2, about $3.50. So I'm open to a payment with Bitcoin. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So we've come in within the hour. Does anybody want to share anything before we close, remembering that this is still recorded? Yes, I'll absolutely send out the PayPal address and the Patreon link. And then if you can just let me know, you can either let me know now, or you can email me, WhatsApp me, Facebook message me, that you definitely want to join, because Sunday is only 2 days away. So I need to make that list of the confirmed participants as soon as possible. There are a couple of people who are keen to come on Sunday who also weren't able to attend this call. So I'm going to try and do the edit and get this call out to them before Sunday so they can also use it to make their final decision. So yeah, lovely to connect to you. And okay, great. Okay, so the decision is final. Basically, in time for you to get the Zoom link for Sunday nights is when the decision is final, I think. I suppose after that, you could even say to me, oh, can you send me the recording for Sunday because I'm coming in now? You know, I don't want to put any demands on you for a deadline. You know, you're free to feel how you go. And with that, I'm going to say thank you, everybody. Good night from me in South Africa, and good morning or good afternoon wherever you are. Welcome, and we'll look forward to maybe meeting you on Sunday. Okay.
Bye.